Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And we'd like to welcome everybody to this event by the Financial Inclusion Committee, a look at the different dimension of inclusions, social, women, financial, and digital. And the first item on our agenda is the invocation and national anthem. Father God, all glory, honor, and blessing, all power and might, all praise and thanksgiving be to you. Abba Father, to us all. We stand on your word, declaring that when we call upon you, you will answer us and be with us in distress. Our deliverer and healer, we seek your protection for our families and all of us from the scourge of COVID-19 and all manner of disease and affliction. We pray especially for our health workers who tirelessly perform their duties at great risk to themselves. We pray for all of us, co workers in the business community, that we may perform our tasks with greater diligence in these difficult times. To serve each other and our country in solidarity and spirit of social responsibility. We pray for all those in authority in government and the private sector that they may have all wisdom, competence, and strength to lead us and serve through this period of crisis with special attention to our poor and disadvantaged brethren who are struggling to survive. We pray for reconciliation and peace among all Filipinos as we come to better realize our oneness as people in good times and bad, as a common dread unites us. So, in acknowledgement of our dependence on you and in obedience, we approach you, Father God, humble ourselves and pray, seek your presence and turn from our evil ways, that you may listen from heaven, forgive our sins, and revive our land. In the loving name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen. We will now have the national anthem. Once again, I'd like to welcome everybody to our program this afternoon. I will be your host, George Chua. I'm a life member of Phoenix and the 2016 Phoenix president. Without further ado, allow me to introduce our 2021 Phoenix president, Attorney Francis Ed Lim. Francis, go ahead and give us the welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, past President George. My fellow Phoenix members, directors, officers, friends from the media, and guests. A pleasant good afternoon to all of you. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar. Thank you for joining us today. I especially welcome all our foreign speakers, Mr. Heito Mauda, who is based in Denmark, Ms. Vedika Bandarkar, I understand from India, and Rachel Freeman is now in Hong Kong, for joining us today. We're lucky indeed to have you today. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to share your views, knowledge, and experiences. This forum, a look at the different dimensions of inclusion, social, women, financial, and digital, aims to increase our awareness of the various facets of inclusion among the CEO and CFO community and other key partners and shareholders in the public and private sector. I'm sure that at the end of this forum, we will learn a lot and we will take away valuable insights with us. This year's FINEX theme is Transcending the New Frontier, Leading Beyond Recovery. In practical terms, what this means is that we have to broaden the base of inclusion to transcend the new frontier brought about by the pandemic and make our recovery and return to normalcy more sustainable and meaningful for our countrymen. That's why this webinar is a welcome development for our organization. Before I close, let me thank our Financial Inclusion Committee, chaired by Gay Santos, with Ian Guevara as Liaison Director, for organizing this very, very timely webinar. Thank you very much, Past President George, for being our MC, for agreeing to be our MC, Edith for agreeing to be our moderator for the forum, and Ned for agreeing to do the closing remarks. Again, thank you, all of you, for joining us, and we look forward to your active participation in this forum. Maraming salamat at mabuhay ang FINEX.
Thank you very much, Attorney Francis Lim, for your welcome remarks. May I now call on the chairperson of the Financial Inclusion Committee to give her opening message. Let's all give a welcome round of applause to Ms. Giselda J. Gay Santos.
Thank you very much,
Jay, go ahead.
George. Good afternoon, President Lim, distinguished speakers, colleagues, and partners in inclusion. No one should be left behind is a statement embodied in vision statements of various developmental institutions. This is a statement that reflects the true essence of inclusion. This phrase has many iterations. This statement is financial inclusion. A good number of businesses have anchored their value proposition on financial inclusion. With the pandemic, clearly it is beyond achieving financial inclusion. There are other equally important dimensions of inclusion that are critical building blocks to financial inclusion: social inclusion, women inclusion, digital inclusion. We have three distinguished speakers, Vedika, Hathum, Rachel, representing various dimensions of inclusion. I believe in the cause and vision of these entities. Honestly, I believe in Water.org, not just because, allow me to brag, I had the privilege of meeting its co-founder, Matt Damon, face-to-face, and I was starstruck. I believe simply because the lack of access to water and sanitation is one, if not the major root cause of why we have this widespread pandemic. Addressing this issue logically addresses the challenges the world is in now. Special listener me. The unique skills of individuals in the spectrum of autism are undervalued or not fully appreciated by the world today. Thanks to Special Listernet, these individuals now have the real chance to be a productive member of society. I just truly hope it will have a presence in the Philippines. And of course, Time Bank. Ms. Rachel Freeman was actually my former manager at the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank Group and was the one who brought me home to the Philippines, allowing me to fall in love all over again with the Philippines. Thank you, Rachel. I am forever grateful. As you know, Time Bank today will talk about their digital and financial inclusion journey. We in the Financial Inclusion Committee of the FINEX are proud to present this forum. Each of you in FINEX are influencers, movers, and shakers. I hope that this forum will provide you the relevant information on the various facets of inclusion, social, financial, women, and digital. With this information, I hope that you can be a participant, influencer to support the promotion of social, financial, women, and digital inclusion in the country. Doing so will allow us as a nation to pave the way to a sustainable path to recovery and growth. Thank you, everyone who made this forum possible. Thank you, especially to the Secretariat. And I hope you'll stay engaged throughout the end of the forum. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much, Gay, for your opening message. And allow me now to have the honor of introducing our first speaker, Mr. Hythum Oda. He's the head of cloud and digital platforms of Orsted Denmark and the chairman of Specialisterne Singapore. As chairman of Specialisterne Singapore, known as the front runner in paving the way for innovative companies such as SAP, Microsoft, Avanade, etc., to benefit from diversity, we include by including autistic people in competitive jobs. We call it the autism advantage. Specialisterne, which is Danish for the specialist, is an innovative social business concept originally founded in Denmark by Thorkild Son since 2004. Hythum's life is made a wealth of experiences, encounters, memorable times of great work, fight, and fun, new horizons, and hope. It is also made of opportunities that should not be missed. Hythum's work within the autism community in Denmark, Singapore, with today's challenges of retaining and attracting talents, resonates with what he calls it as his life mission. That is movement, autism at work. Helping autistic people who have equal work and career opportunities worldwide. Hythum is an experienced information technology executive who possesses more than 20 plus years experience and success. Prior to his current role, Hythum has been with Microsoft for 16 years in several roles as Sales Director, Microsoft APAC, at Avanade as Senior Director, Modern Workplace Lead across Asia Pacific and Latin America, leading Microsoft Office 365, Cloud, Azure, LOT Suite, data insights, infrastructure and security, cyber and identity software, and services solution, sales in the Asia Pacific, Denmark, and the Middle East. As Hythum puts it, cloud is a given. CEOs and CIOs no longer ask whether they should use cloud, but rather how. Cloud evolves from point solution to strategic enabler to the new connected economy. Hythum calls out, cloud can make a difference to customers, businesses right now, beginning with the things in their businesses that matter the most. This is why Hythum calls it the Internet of Your Things. It starts by building on the infrastructure customers already have in place, using familiar devices and services in new ways, and incorporating the right technology to ultimately help his clients use data to create insights and make more informed business decisions. Without further ado, let us all give a round of applause and welcome to Mr. Hythum Oda. Hythum, take the floor.
Thank you very much, former Chairman George Chu, for that warming introduction. It's really warming. Thank you. And Chairman Francisco Ed Lim, thank you very much for providing me this opportunity and this stage to share what's close to my heart and Thank you, Gay, for inviting me to this opportunity. I'm honored to be at such an esteemed group of empowered individuals. I hope at the end of my presentation and the end of our talk today that I have provided you a strong base on how you can go about in including what we call neurodiverse candidates into your workplace, and how not just by giving them opportunities to have a job, but also they will actually provide you with a competitive edge that is more sought out today in our Industrial Revolution 4.0, whereabout it's no longer the need for generalists, and maybe a lot of the cloud and the different concepts that was mentioned earlier introducing me, is that we have more at any given time in history the need for specialists. And this is where neurodiverse people on the autism spectrum are very good at. And I hope to enlighten you and excite you about opportunities that you may want to look into. Without that, I'll try and share my desktop, and hopefully everyone can see that happening. Share screen. And just let me know if that's coming through. No?
Yep, we can see it.
It's not showing. So you see the center presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So with that, I will just go quickly into a brief, little, just setting the stage on what people on the autism spectrum experience when they are typically applying for jobs in maybe your organizations. Thank you for listening. I want to I think that where we started and how we are and why we are here today, specialists, and it really started like many other stories, sometimes with a family is introduced to a challenge. This young boy that you see here is our founder's son, Torkel Sonne. The boy at the time, just before this picture, a year or so, was 3 years old, diagnosed with heavily autism. And as any typical in those days, almost 2 decades ago, the family received the message that your son will be dependent on you the rest of his life. There's no job, there's no future for him. And of course, that is heartbreaking for any parents. And at the time, there was really not much knowledge and understanding how we should go about the autism. Now, as every children are, sometimes they sit and play around with paper and pencils. So this young boy, shortly, a few months after they had come home from a trip and holiday in Europe, where they are traveling, and we're talking many years ago before GPSs, we had maps, and these maps had quadrants with numbers on them reflecting what the different regions are and how to find it. This boy, out of his mind, by his own, with no reference book, just a pencil and a paper, was exactly replicating what that map looked like. And this is where Torkel Sonne, an IT executive in the biggest telco in Denmark, realized in his space today, he's constantly seeking out people with very special skills, maybe attention to details, numbers, recognitions, memories, which is very sought out in the cyberspace, for example, today. And that's where Torkel realized that for him, if that's a skill that autistic people have, well, then he could absolutely see this is a need that many other industries. So he gave up his job, found a Specialisten, and now almost for 2 decades, he's been creating opportunities and empowering organizations and how they can hire people on autistics with autistics and how they can include it in the workplace. So what I do hope to get from you today is give you some understanding on how diversity can add value to your organizations, how is wines could be relevant to you. I think it really is just about how we as organizations will want to see ourselves and image ourselves for the future, and how we can combat the different challenges that the technology is sending our way. Just briefly, most of it was mentioned today. The Specialisten is a social enterprise. So we are a non-profit organization. We were established in 2003, and we've had global presence. We have about 13 locations, and we are expanding continuously. Hopefully soon we may have one in Philippines, if maybe Gay, and we can find the right sponsors to support us there. But really what I want to call out is that over the last period since we have existed, we have helped more than 10,000 people on the autism spectrum into jobs. And what I would like to call out here is that once you have people that are hired, they actually maintain their jobs. So we have a retention capacity here about 93%. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the foremost, really what we have been doing is that we have founded our own approach and a methodology and framework on how we will assess, source, and help include the people with autism into the workplace and understand those challenges the workplace will face, thereby making it an option that is available rather than a challenge that organizations view that. And when we talk about challenges and why we use the dandelion as our expression or our logo, and for those who have gardens or for the greenkeeper, when they view the garden, they view it with the dandelion suddenly now disturbing the looks, and they typically root it out. But the reality is that the dandelion itself has many minerals and many beneficial components that we as humans would have very good use of. So we should introduce it into our table, and we should introduce it into our meals more often than we do today, rather than rooting out. And it's the same with people on the autism. We see the strangeness in their looks or how they perceive versus what capabilities lie behind that. And this is really what I'm hoping that we could create more awareness of. As an organization, we're not just, as you heard, we don't just exist in Denmark, we are global. Our founder here in the middle, Torkel Sonne, is a sought out speaker at the World Economic Forum, United Nations, where we're engaged in driving the autism activities. So we are not just working local, we want to reach out as much as we can through global organizations and partners and provide a much more known feeling about what people with autism can do and how they also have the right to have an opportunity. These are some articles I'll leave behind and you could always go looking for. When we talk about people on autism, we typically address them as neurodiversity. And it's just maybe a simple concept where it's about neurological differences and they should be respected equally as we are. It's not many call it, is it a sickness, a disease? I don't want to go down that path, but it's just about what we say that we as neurotypicals and they're neurodiverse, but we're pretty much the same. We still fit in the same hand, we can still shake hands and we can still, for those who may not know, when we talk about neurodiversity, it would be people with different dyslexia, it could be autism, it could be ADHD, OCD. So these all come under what we call the neurodiverse workforce. These are large numbers. And when we think about that the amount of disorders that are happening globally on the autism spectrum, 2% of the global population, about 105 million and counting today is a large number. And it's a large number of a fact that these are people that we are, how to say, looking the other way, like the dandelion, we're rooting them out and not providing them with a chance and opportunity to engage and join our workforces. Many have a thinking around people on the autism spectrum, they're not educated, or they have been challenged and not, have no skill sets. It's in the contrary. And that's the sad part about it. But the reality is that there are 85% of them that are completely without jobs, but they all have skill sets in different levels where we as organizations and we as professionals are constantly demanding that from our own workplace. So if we provide them with some chance and an opportunity to prove themselves, we have a chance to tap into a resource that we are constantly seeking out and constantly in demand for when we are seeking or have vacancy in our organizations. It's always good to talk about numbers, just because that again highlights some of the challenges or the size of the challenges. I've taken Australia. I don't have the numbers for Philippines today, but in Australia, and this is a worldwide number, so we talk about 1 in 59 typically on the autism spectrum. But the challenge and this is again a number that goes again and again across the world. 59% in Australia, in what we see as a region that is pretty much should be more open, are unemployed. And 46 of them, and this is really the number that's an interesting one for you to recognize, 46% of the people that are hired in what we call are overeducated or underemployed. A very clear example, I've worked in the space in Australia for many years, supporting them since they established in 2015. And we have hired people that have been doing jobs in McDonald's and other typical, very low paid, that are very skilled and sought out. And now they have positions in banks and industries where they're doing cybersecurity or financial crime and others. It's just because they failed on the interview process. And this is where I hope that we can share with you that they are out there and they are available to support your organizations. Maybe putting some number that's more relevant to the Philippines. Within the population of about 109, this is what I recently could see, there's about 1.9 million talents in Philippines today that you have an opportunity to engage with, that you can position in different open with you. And to compare that with Singapore, why this is interesting for Singapore, Singapore has 34,000 open positions within the fintech or the industry. And that alone just shows about where they're used to importing or bringing resources externally. You could actually provide this either from remote, or they could actually use resources from within. We did a study with one of our partners here, Microsoft, and they came back and they were just curious to understand why they have so few that have hired within the space. And as you can see, 50% didn't apply. They knew they were going to fail, or the job description did not really provide them clarity. They feel not confident enough. And this is pretty much where, as we talked about, that people on autism are very honest. And if the job description doesn't help them provide or share what they are good at, they will hold back on that. And the same day, once they've people that are applied, why didn't they have more that are hired? Yeah, again, back to the dandelion. Unfortunately, they did not pass through our very rigid approach for how do we recruit, because we haven't tailored our programs. We know exactly what we're looking for, and we don't provide an opportunity to open up or provide them an opportunity to share more about who they are. So that's very clear of why we need to have more mindsets around how do we recruit, because I think we'll have a better opportunity in having much more broader workforce. Again, why should we hire people with autism? They are known to be very independent thinking. They're very good in math and skills. So this should, I'm sure you all have heard of these. What we also have learned through our different engagements is they do work a little bit 60% faster than an average employee. And they also have what's called a good mindset and heart for retention. And as I mentioned earlier, in that when we've helped 10,000 people and our numbers about retention is about 93%, because they didn't have opportunities before. They don't look for bigger compensations paid. They're just helpful and grateful, I would say, that they've had an opportunity to have a job and they're actually excelling in their jobs and they have a career with you. So you would have an opportunity here to retain and attract talents that who really will stay with you for many years to come. When I was introduced, there was a lot about cloud, competitiveness, and I'm sure every one of you sitting there today, you're constantly looking for people who does data analytics, cybersecurity, cloud specialists, et cetera, and keep going on. These are the times where we no longer can be dependent on just an engineer or just a specialist who is now more like a generalist. We need to go back and sort people out who can enjoy, who are enlightened and ignited by constantly doing something they're very good at again and again. So this is the time where you will be more demanding of finding specialists. So, and this is where we can help you out. So the people on the spectrum here are typically very much specialists. Now, it's not just about attracting resources to your organizations, but it's also about once you've attracted them, how does that contribute to your daily teams? In Austria, we had an assessment over organizations that have hired and have been engaged for years in the autism spectrum. And what we've learned is that once a team has been introduced to teammates that are in the neurodiverse, there was a much more different team dynamics, more positive team dynamics. The atmosphere has changed. Integration, interactions, conflicts are resolved much faster. The way you communicate with a person on the autism spectrum and how you have to be more clear and more direct and more specific, you start using that as a leader with all your other employees. And now everyone is feeling that they're getting more clear directions. And overall, as you can see from these numbers, that there's been a very positive impact on the teams that have engaged with resources on the neurodiverse autism spectrum. And that is, again, another benefit, not just being hiring, but it is also adding to the overall atmosphere at your organizations. So this is another area where this advantage is coming to you and helping you transform your organizations. What we do, just briefly, and we do this differently in different regions, so we help with recruiting and mentoring. So we have our own approach on how you source. So it's not a traditional JD, and I don't want to go into depth here, but we have a different approach for how do we seek out the talent so we can attract them to apply. We have our own approach for how do we then assess their talent and help the organization integrating into the workplace. That's our specialty, and this is our own method that we have implemented. We do consultings in some years. Example, in Denmark, we have 35 plus consultants who are doing on daily basis consulting. But we also, as part of, you heard, when we are integrating neurodiversity into the workforce, we are providing coaching and guidance to leadership and HR and others on how the appraisals and the programs, and you can then learn and adapt more about becoming what we will call it a dandelion leader. So just to give you some of the tasks, and this is maybe where a lot of you are sitting, so what can they do? What kind of jobs, positions can they possess? Working in Australia, we have hired over the last 5 years, 400 talents. We have a retention in our Australian group about 95% since we have started hiring them. And all these are special positions that we've helped recruit into. As you can see, these are pretty much, a lot of them fit very well into your own organizations and your own requirements and demands. Not sure if farming is the right one, but this has also been one of the areas that we have sought resources into. But very much, very skilled and very highly sought out resources have been found within the autism space. And many times, and most of the times, they are in low paid jobs today, underappreciated, and you have a chance there to attract them to your organizations. We won't be here today unless we have partners. I've only shared a few of our partners here that have been supporting the programs, implementing the programs, and working, collaborating with us. May it be Westpac, as you heard, Microsoft, SAP. SAP committed to a worldwide implementation of the Autism at Workplace by 1% of their 65,000 resources. So that's a strong commitment, and I hope that you will also have this into your thoughts on how they can add value to you. We, as I mentioned, are working closely with the international organizations on maybe the United Nations, Ashoka, World Economic Forums, on empowering the masses to know more about it, to demystifying that. So we'll continue our work on that approach as well. So I hope that I have now provided you with some incitement or ignitement that neurodiversity is a competitive advantage, and in the times of the Industrial Revolution 4.0, that this is where you can differentiate yourself from your competitors, for your colleagues out there, and look into hiring a diverse workforce. My contact details are there. Thank you for listening, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Haitham, for your presentation. And now may I call on the Chief Global Impact Officer of Water.org, Vedika Bandarkar. Vedika oversees all impact efforts within Water.org and leads the team responsible for working with financial institutions, global investors, and other sector leaders to empower millions of people in need with access to safe water and sanitation. She previously served as Water.org's managing director, India. Vedika has more than 25 years of experience building teams and businesses with Indian and international financial institutions. Prior to joining Water.org in January 2016, she served as Vice Chairman and Managing Director at Credit Suisse Securities India Private Limited from 2010 to 2015. Previously, she served as the Managing Director and Head of Investment Banking at JP Morgan. Vedika serves as an independent director on the boards of several companies. She has been appointed as a part-time member of the bank's board bureau, and she also serves as a board member of the Jai Vakil Foundation, an institution focused on children and adults with intellectual disabilities. Let us all give a round of applause and welcome to Vedika.
Thank you very much, George. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Finex, for inviting me to be a part of this really useful conversation on the different dimensions of inclusion. Often when we talk about inclusion, automatically our mind goes towards financial inclusion, or we start thinking about very narrowly in terms of digital inclusion. But I think it's incredibly important for us to think about inclusion much more broadly. And yes, financial inclusion is a part of it. Digital inclusion is a part of it. As Haitham just talked earlier about inclusion in a much more broader sense of, including in our workforce and diversity of people with on the autism spectrum disorder. In the next 10 minutes, I hope to talk to you about why access to safe water and sanitation, and why and how does it lead to inclusion. So if I could have the next slide, please. So who are we? I represent this great organization called Water.org. Water.org, we are a not-for-profit organization. We are exclusively focused on enabling access to safe water and sanitation for people living at the base of the economic pyramid. And how do we do it? We enable this access through market-driven financial solutions. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We work in 11 countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And to date, this is our 30th year. So we've been in existence for more than 30 years. We have two great co-founders, our CEO, Gary White, and the second co-founder is somebody who Gay spoke about earlier, Matt Damon. And to date, working in 11 countries, we have reached more than 34 million people who have been able to get access to safe water and sanitation. Next slide, please. So why is this issue important? And coming from 2020, where the whole world has been and continues to face this pandemic, maybe this slide is absolutely unnecessary, because I think the last 12 months have taught us, and we've learned so much about hand washing. And how can you wash your hands if you do not have access to safe water? But more than that, if I look at it both from a global need as well as from a Philippines point of view. So 1 in 9 million people globally, almost 800 million people, lack access to safe water. The numbers for sanitation are even worse. So 1 in 3 people, which is 2 billion people globally, lack access to a toilet. Every 2 minutes, a child somewhere in the world dies because of water-related disease. And as all of you know, water-related diseases, the main cause of water-related disease is the lack of access to safe and good quality water. And women and children, often girls, spend 200 million hours per day in collecting water. The numbers are startling and the numbers are terrible. If we look at it from a Philippines context, again, the numbers are pretty large. Almost 60 million people lack access to safely managed and high quality drinking water. About a fourth of the population lacks access to safely managed sanitation. And 10 million people, almost 10% of the country, do not have hand washing facilities. And when we, again, linking it back to COVID, when we always talk about hand washing and we say water is the first line of defense, is the first PPE, how can people defend themselves? How can people protect themselves against COVID if they have no access to hand washing and no access to safe water? So this is both a local as well as a global issue, and enabling people with access to safe water and sanitation can help the whole world achieve several of the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. Next slide, please. So how do we do it? And we've been doing this now, not for the entire 30 years of our existence, but certainly half of it, so more than 15 years. And the idea is really simple. So what we do is we partner primarily with financial institutions, where we are saying to a financial institution, actually, let me step back. We believe that communities that lack access to safe water and sanitation, people who lack access to safe water and sanitation, they know what solutions they want to adopt. They know what they need to do. But more often than not, what they lack is the upfront capital. So they don't have the upfront capital to implement that solution. They don't have the upfront capital to build that solution. And so what we are trying to do is to help people get access to that upfront capital at an affordable cost. So we start with looking at the financial institutional infrastructure of that country, of that region, of that city, and say, okay, which are the financial institutions which have the channels to reach people living in poverty? We then work with those partners and convince them to add a water and sanitation loan in their suite of products. It could be a loan to build a toilet. It could be a loan to get a water connection. It could be a loan to get water storage. And what we provide to these financial institutions is a lot of capacity building help, a lot of technical assistance, and if needed, for a time bound, for a limited period of time, some risk mitigation. And we also help our financial institution partners reach their customers so that the customers are aware that they can borrow in case they want to implement the solution. The customers borrow, implement the solution, repay, and the financial institution is able to obviously continue lending. For the financial institution, it is a business and it's not philanthropy, and that's the only way it is sustainable. And you might be wondering, well, which sort of financial institutions we work with? We work with all sorts of financial institutions. We obviously work with microfinance institutions, which is where we started. And I'm delighted that several of our partners in Philippines are on the line today. But we also work with large commercial banks. We work with cooperatives, basically any institution which has the infrastructure and which does reach the last mile, i.e. people are living in poverty with other products. But we didn't stop here. In countries like Philippines, in Indonesia and Cambodia, we also work with utilities. We work with service providers, whether they are large utilities like the Manila Waters, or whether they are small regional and state-based utilities, the water districts. Again, I'm delighted that several of them are on the call. We work with them because they do have the network to reach the last mile, and we help them reach the last mile in terms of the customers living in poverty. The next slide, please. So what have we been able to achieve through this? I'm delighted to say that we've been able to reach globally, working across the 11 countries, almost 35 million people. People have borrowed close to 8 million loans from the financial institutions. And in this process, by borrowing, they've been, almost $3 billion of capital has been raised in these countries through domestic sources. In Philippines, which has been one of our fastest growing regions, we've reached more than 4 million people. Our financial institutional partners, which include microfinance institutions, it includes some rural banks, have been able to make more than 1 million loans. And they have been able to deploy almost $200 million of capital to enable these more than 4 million people to get access to safe water and sanitation. Next slide, please. So what does access to safe water and sanitation get, and why is it relevant from an inclusion point of view? So I wanted to divide inclusion into two broad categories. One is financial inclusion, and the second one is social inclusion. And I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about each. So as you remember, when I started speaking, I said, people living in poverty do know what solutions they want, but they lack this upfront capital. So working with these financial institutions and through our approach, people are able to get the upfront capital at affordable rates so that they're able to implement the solution which they want. And what we found is this access to upfront capital, one, gives them a permanent access, but two, equally importantly, reduces the recurring cost of access. And in the Q&A, I'm happy to talk through an example where we found that before somebody has access on a permanent basis, the cost of access can be as high as 15–20% of their income on a monthly basis, which is way too high. But once they build a permanent solution, they're able to reduce that cost of access to less than 5%, which is much more sustainable. Of course, if you have access to safe water and sanitation, you fall ill much less. And so you're able to reduce your overall spending on healthcare, thus increasing your overall family's income and living standard. From a social inclusion point of view, I remember I told you women and girls spend 200 million hours per day in collecting water. If you have water at your home, you save a lot of time. And we found that with this time saved, about a third of it is used by women for some way of generating income. So that time saved is actually used in enhancing the income of the family. It's also used when the girls no longer have to spend time with their mothers in collecting water, they go back to schools and they continue to study, and which I don't need to tell you what a great advantage that is. There's increased privacy and convenience, and there is positive impact on health because you're no longer falling ill due to waterborne diseases. So getting access to safe water and sanitation, and intuitively you might not think that it is a way of inclusion, but it is a great way of both financial as well as social inclusion. Next slide, please. And I wanted to end by talking about how we work. So all our work is really through partnerships. And we partner with all the stakeholders, several of who are on this call, and look forward to partnering with many of you who we don't yet partner with. So let me start by different categories of stakeholders who we partner with. I talked about financial institutions, and I talked about service providers or the water or sanitation utilities. So we partner with them very intensively. We help them reach people living in poverty. We provide them technical assistance. We provide them capacity building. And where appropriate, for a finite time, we also provide them risk mitigation. We partner a lot with companies, with corporations, and a lot, again, we partner with companies across the world. How do we partner with them? We are a not-for-profit, so obviously we need philanthropic assistance. And our approach when we work with companies has been that this is catalytic philanthropy. This is not a typical NGO. We're not taking money from you and saying, okay, giving it to a community to dig wells, because that's great, but it's not sustainable. We are really leveraging your philanthropy in a much more sustainable manner and getting more out of every peso or every dollar that you give us. So it's very catalytic. The second way we partner with companies are leveraging on the company's strengths. We know several of our corporate partners have fantastic strengths, whether it is in terms of communication, whether it is in terms of messaging, whether it in terms of reaching the last mile. And we look forward to partnering and leveraging of these strengths. And finally, recently, we've also seen companies get very focused on the ESG as part of their sustainability, so environmental, social, and governance goals. And we are finding more and more that as companies are focusing on ESG and weaving that into sustainability, access, enabling access to those that don't have access to safe water and sanitation is a big part of their strategies. We also partner with governments, both at the federal, the district, and the local level. How? One, keeping on nudging the governments to focus on access to safe water and sanitation, and making those links between access to safe water and sanitation and health, access to safe water and sanitation and education, and helping the governments, all the governments have limited budgets. So, helping them focus their budgets on people who really need, people who making sure that the grants are going to people who really need, and finding market solutions where possible. And also in terms of nudging, in terms of sustainable shifts, whether these are policy shifts or practice shifts. And again, happy to talk about this more in the Q&A. And finally, we also partner with development financial institutions, both domestic and bilateral and multilateral. So for example, in Philippines, we work very closely with the Development Bank of Philippines, where they have been making loans to financial institutions so that the financial institutions in turn can lend for water and sanitation, as well as exploring blended finance instruments, both with the governments as well as with DFIs. So again, in short, solving the issue of access to safe water and sanitation is incredibly important and incredibly necessary to achieve full inclusion. And it can be done in a sustainable manner, and it can be done in the form of partnerships. And happy to engage with all of you as we go into the Q&A. Thank you. Back to you, George.
Thank you very much, Vedika. And for our third and final speaker, we have Rachel Freeman. Rachel Freeman is the Executive Director and Business. Wait, let me just start my video. Okay. And the Business Development Officer for Time Global. Time Global is the technology and solutions firm powering Time Bank, the first digital bank in South Africa with now 2 million customers. Rachel Freeman is an experienced and internationally recognized financial expert, particularly in the areas of financial inclusion and innovative financial technologies. Before joining Time, Ms. Freeman served as the IFC Financial Institutions Advisory Manager for Asia since 2014. In her role, she led IFC's advisory program for existing and potential investee clients for value enhancement and development impact to achieve IFC's goals in financial inclusion and climate change mitigation. Rachel led client solutions development and execution in SME finance, bank, fintech collaboration, including the creation of the Apex platform, MFI transformation, uh, banking on women, agri-finance, and climate change finance for strategic IFC clients. Since 2001, she had served she had several senior positions in IFC in Central Asia, Africa, and Asia. Prior to joining IFC, Rachel was involved in several entrepreneurial ventures in the United States and Russia. She holds a master's in business administration from the University of Michigan Business School and a degree in international politics and economics, Russian from Middlebury College. She also attended executive education at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Let's all welcome Rachel Freeman. Rachel, please go ahead.
Hi, and I'm very happy to be speaking here today, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to bring up the slides, and I hope you're going to be able to see this. All right, so, or Gay, can you let me know? Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. Okay, great. So I'm really very proud and very happy to be talking to you about Time today for many reasons, but the most important reason is that last week we were very honored to announce that the Coke-Conway family has become one of our shareholders, both in Time Global, which is the technology company, and Time Bank, which is the bank in South Africa. And now we are hoping that we'll be able to bring this technology to the Philippines. So for the last several months, we've been looking and thinking about how to bring our views of financial inclusion into the Philippines. So thank you very much to Finex and to my former colleague, Gay, for inviting me here today. So first, Time Bank, just a little bit. We are a digital bank, but when we think about digital, we actually believe very much in a high-tech, high-touch approach. So we'll talk to you about a little bit about what is the difference between digital banking in Europe and the United States, which we think is one very developed area, and then the upcoming digital banking that's happening more in emerging markets, and how this plays out for financial inclusion. So just to say that now we celebrated our second birthday about a week ago, and we are imminently hitting 3 million customers across South Africa. So we're very proud about that. And right now a slight majority, but a majority of our customers are women, and they are a majority low-income women. So, you know, some of the challenges, and when people think about digitizing, and during COVID, there's been lots of discussion about how so many people are going digital and that digital finance is really taking over. But actually, we believe that digital finance is slowly moving forward, but actually there are a lot of challenges. So it isn't like you snap your fingers and any financial institution will just start to acquire customers digitally. And that's because actually the way that most digital banks are set up, we believe that they are really designed for the kind of, we call this kind of the digitally savvy group in London or Paris or New York that are, you know, very focused on digital and is kind of younger and hip. So this is very focused on that. But we actually don't think that long-term banking can just be about that segment. And you're going to have to think more in terms of how to expand digital banking to a mass market. So some of the challenges that are globally for in digital banking is that first interaction is quite difficult. And it's actually much more expensive to digitally advertise than we would think. But also, when most people think about digitally onboarding, it means taking the phone. And if you have the phone, then you have to open it up and you download an app, and then you start to transition it so that you can get your face in different ways. And then slowly you can onboard. But what we realized, what we think is that most people find that to be quite challenging, and it's not very fun, and can be kind of frustrating if you don't get the picture and it keeps asking you. And then often people drop off or just think, oh, this is not for me. Whereas we believe that actually there are a lot of benefits to being digital if the financial institution starts to think more broadly about that. And the second piece is that banking is really about trust, and financial inclusion is really about trusting the institution. And that's quite difficult if it's just through the phone. So you need to think about how better to do that so that there's a really touch of, so that there can be more trust, and thinking about how to make sure that people feel like they are being walked in the journey and that they're being explained what products and services are. So it is our experience that most financial institutions, when they open an account, you go to a branch, you spend about 45 minutes and you fill out a lot of forms, or someone fills out those forms for you. But in the end, there's very little explanation of how that account works and what it means to have an account and how do you actually use that. And that increases much more when it's just done digitally, so that it's unclear how to actually use the account. So all these challenges mean that there is some part of digital inclusion and digital financial inclusion that's happening, but it's still much more, and what we call global kind of fintech hubs or larger cities in developed countries. Now, when we think about digital banking in places like the Philippines, which we consider emerging markets, there's the next piece, which is that truly, and if you look at the Philippines, about 95% of all transactions are still in cash. And really, most people are going to keep their money in cash unless they can really trust that they believe that they can put it into digital and get it back. So it's really about giving that trust of how do you get cash in and cash out and make that very easy with as little friction as possible. And that is not something that's always completely easy to do. Because what we recognize is that while you may want to have your money digitally and have it on the phone, actually you want to be able to spend it or use it, and most places don't accept that. So it means that there must be ways to put it in and out of cash, and there must be very close to you. It must be that there are places you can go to do that are part of your normal life and that are quite easy to use. So with this, we have really thought about how to reach customers is by helping someone and walking down a digital path with them. Because we do believe that long-term cash is more risky than having something digital and having a bank account where you can have money in an account. But that takes time to do, and you really need someone who's going to walk down a digital path. And it'd be easy to find in places where most people are normally willing to go. So we thought about this, and we came up with our vision of access. And we believe that there are three parts to financial access, or financial inclusion. The first is physical access. So for most people, they need to be able to bank very close to where they live. So it cannot take a full day to get to a place. And we talked a lot with different institutions in the Philippines and Myanmar, in Indonesia, around Asia. And there are people who are traveling, or farmers taking a full day to go to a bank and back. So they lose a full day. So one of the things about financial inclusion means that there must be physical access. The next part is there needs to be financial access. This means that the products need to be simple and easy, but also transparent in terms of fees. It needs to be very clear how much it costs to bank. In South Africa, banking is actually quite expensive. So most people, when they may have a bank account and they get a salary or wages put into the bank account, they pull it out immediately because actually they need to pay for that account, and it becomes very expensive to have an account. So the next part of financial inclusion is you really need to solve the financial access part. And the third, and what we think is the most important, is emotional access, where you really need to be able to trust and feel that you are part of the community of that financial institution. You need to feel that those people are walking the journey with you, that they have simple products that are easy to understand, and it's not intimidating to use them. So we thought about how to then take the tools of digital financial inclusion, digital finance, and merge this with what we thought about how to improve access. And from that, what we did is how we created the aspects of TimeBank that we think are very unique and will be actually work very well in the Philippines. So just a little bit about us is that we are a multi-country digital banking group, and we launched our first kind of full bank in South Africa. We have a full banking license. We hope that our next bank will be in the Philippines. But actually, we have our full technology team that does all the coding is in Vietnam. So, we believe we're a really global institution, and we are in countries that we think reflect where we want to be. So that's places like Vietnam and South Africa coming to the Philippines. And while I'm in Hong Kong now, we will be relocating to Singapore very soon. So just a little bit about us. We now have actually 2.9 million customers, and about 56% of our customers use our account at least once every month. So we consider that to be a very high activity rate that people are using the account. We have about over 120,000 people onboarding every month. And as I said before, we're about 30% cheaper than the most other affordable banks. So we really focus on the financial access part. But what we think is the most important is the physical access, where you can download the app on a phone, but we think that that's only for the small part, and only 15% of our customers onboard that way and use the account in that way. But what we believe is that it's easy to bring financial inclusion if you embed what you're doing with where people go to buy groceries. So the majority of our customers onboard in grocery stores, and they can do cash in, cash out at what we call the till point. So when you're buying actually milk or eggs, you go to that and you're at the checkout, you can easily put money in the account and take money out. So we have felt that that's where people actually go to spend money. When they think about using money, they think about first and foremost buying food. So that's why we have integrated into retail stores in South Africa. And when I'm hearing this, and if you're thinking to the Philippines, you can see why we believe that it's such a perfect partnership, and we're so happy about the Go Conway family and JG Summit joining forces with us because of the large retail footprint that they have in the Philippines, and that we think by bringing our systems into the Philippines, we can expand access, where we know that still about 70 or over 70% of people still do not have a formal bank account in the Philippines. And we're really hoping to change that. So, this may be a little busy, the slide, but we'll show you how it works. So first, you can see the kiosk on the side, and I think for you, it's on the right side. So you go into a grocery store, and you come up to the kiosk, and you can open a full bank account in between 3 and 5 minutes. So under 5 minutes, you open a bank account, you answer a few questions, and at the end, you get a debit card that has your name on it. It's fully active, and it comes out of the kiosk. Use that. You do not put any paper into the kiosk. You don't give anything to the kiosk. It is all taking, and there's digital ways to onboard, but it's very easy to use. We have clients that range from 16 to in their 90s. They onboard on the kiosk. It's very easy. Once you have open account, there are ambassadors that are in the retail stores, and they help you then download the app. There's Wi-Fi connected with the kiosk, and you can use that to download the app, and they show you how to do that if you want help, and they explain every way to use the account. So when you walk away from the ambassador, you know exactly how to use the account, what are the benefits. So our special program for saving money, and how the longer you have the money in the account, the more interest rate and the more you get to save, and with the structures of that, and how to plan for different goals like school fees or other events that are happening, birthday parties, things like that, that you can plan for in events. With the Goal Save program, shows you how you can transfer money for people across the country, which has become very important, I believe, during the COVID period. Shows you we have insurance policies that you can purchase through the kiosk, and many other ways that you can use this, but you get all of that training then by the ambassador. So, and the ambassador comes from youth programs in the communities. So you're talking to someone who is speaking your exact dialect of local language, and in South Africa there are many, who's at least lives within at least one taxi stop of where the grocery store is. So very much part of your community. And it's going to be the same person who comes each time, which says to you, you really know that you can talk to this person and they're really part of your community. From there, you then can go to the cash register and put money into the account by just handing in the card you have or getting a token off the phone. And then once you have money in the account, you can start taking money out, in and out. It's very easy, and that system is free. There's no fees for taking money in and out of the account at the cash register. So what we have found is that of our more women than men customers, that all of the women use that service all the time, that this has really made them much more digitally savvy through this process, use the account very well, and by embedding into their lives has enabled them to become much more kind of part of the financial structure of South Africa than they were before. Now we've built in some different lending products at the cash register as well. But I think for now, what's most important is to think how you can use the grocery store and places where people can go all the time in order to expand what you have in terms of financial access. I think it was really interesting hearing first what Haitham talked about. I mean, I really think we could think about how to use the people he's discussing could be excellent ambassadors who are from the communities. That could be really interesting. But I also think that there are ways that we could actually work together with water.org. So it was quite interesting listening to the other ones and thinking about how you can use kind of the kiosk as well as our structures to start to work with other institutions. And we are a partnership-based art institution, as well as the relationships with the grocery stores. We've also developed a relationship with the largest church group in Southern Africa called ZCC. They have a very large presence and had approached us so that we could use the kiosk and the structures in order to have bank cards for all of the church members. We have the kiosk in the standing form in the grocery stores, as well as we have a roaming mobile kiosk you can take to congregations. So we've now built that out, and as we hope that there's going to be a post-COVID period that we'll be able to expand that even more. So, what we think is that there's ways to bring different types of products and different channels. So we don't assume, one, that people always want to use the phone, which is why we have the card. But for those people who want to use the phone, you don't even need to get the card. You have both channels. We have the ambassadors that are in the stores, but we also have ways, a call center if you want to do that. So we have thought that there are very many ways that people want to have that physical access, financial access, emotional access, and we've built that across all of the products and services that we have at Time. We've expanded at how you can pay for electricity, get airtime. All of that is very easy, as well as things like Netflix, vouchers, all these different aspects that are coming into people's lives. And then are thinking about how to do things like lending that are very short-term, they're very responsible lending based on things like installment finance, which has become popular in a digital way, but we believe you can bring in installment finance for white goods in our grocery stores, the way that people used to use things that were called lay-by in many countries. So when we think about how we're working at Time, it's really about empowering people and giving them more dignity. When we hear our CEO in South Africa, he believes that our goal is to bring dignity into financial services and financial inclusion. And that's by giving people the tools and different options to allow them to choose how they want to interact in the financial world, but making it so that we help them every step of the journey so that they can move down that path to become part of a digital bank. And that is the approach that we are hoping to bring when we come to the Philippines. So I think now you've had kind of 3 super interesting presentations, and I look forward to having questions, as well as actually engaging with the other panelists on how three very kind of different institutions actually could, in very interesting ways, work together to bring greater inclusion to people who are looking to be employed, but right now are challenged about getting employed and how we can work on that, as well as providing the foundations, about water, as we look at the impact of climate change across many different regions where you have either too much water or not enough water. Things like water.org are going to be critical to making sure that everybody has access to the basic needs in order to thrive and be able to then kind of grow and become more financially empowered by institutions like TIME.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for your informative talk. And now we are going to go into our open forum with a question and answer. The moderator will be Ms. Edith Dichao, who's the Liaison Director for Programs and the Programs and Meetings Committee. And the members of our panel are, of course, Mr. Haitham Auda, Ms. Vedika Bandarkar, and Ms. Rachel Freeman. Take it away, Edith.
Okay, thank you to our resource speaker, Haitham, Vedika, and Rachel. And just to give a short summary, it is a good eye-opener for all of us that inclusion is not only financial in what terms. It gives us three dimensions of where inclusion should be. For Haitham, we had heard about neurodiversity, which is showed that there is a lack of appreciation for those population that is in the neurodiversity group, especially the autism group. And we have learned that there is a trove of treasury in terms of unappreciated talents in this group. They are very good in computer and mathematical skills. They have good attention to details. They're independent thinkers. And of course, they have a 93% stay in their employers. And then in terms of water, it's a known fact that water is a national security. And it gives not only financial inclusion, but also social inclusion to people who will now have access to water. And it's not a charity, but it's a collaboration between institutions, both private and public, so that we will all work towards a sustainable world. And finally, of course, digitalization in terms of the banking industry. It's good to know that the Philippines is slowly but surely going into that direction, especially for our unbanked population. So there is a question posted earlier. I think this is directed to Haitham. It says, in the countries that specialists exist, are the enabling policies and laws supportive of your causes? And what are the prerequisites, let's say, in terms of laws and other regulations for a specialist to operate successfully, let's say, in the Philippines?
If I understand the question correctly, is it about having governmental laws that enforce or support neurodiversity? I don't think we don't need any specific laws to force it. It's more of a mindset driven, it's a thought thinking, it's a cultural responsibility, it's a social responsibility. There are some regions in countries, for example, like I say in Japan, where they do have some specific regulations around hiring people that are what we call handicapped. They have that same in South America. So there are some regions that has that as part of governmental laws. And that supports, of course, people in all spectrums, in all areas of handicapped, if we would use that, and neurodiverse people as well. So in Brazil, it's 1.5% of your workforce, I believe it was the number, that has to be hired from people that are less fortunate, so people that are handicapped. That provides opportunities for companies to be open-minded and seeking out these differences. And the same goes for Japan. But it necessarily doesn't need the laws. It more like should be corporate responsibility that should drive it. I think that should be the right answer. But if we can work with the legislation in the Philippines and make that a law, it would just be benefit. There are more than 10 million people in Philippines, according to the numbers that should be available for being hired.
Yeah, just to add, in fact, the Philippine government gives tax credits to companies that hires disabled people, actually. There's another question from an attendee. It says, other countries are very liberal in hiring people with disabilities, like people with autism. In our country, how can you convince like the Philippine employers to hire them? I guess this is a common question for those who are just who took this forum. They're asking, how can you help convince employers to hire these people?
Let me be first, make it clear. There's no country in the world that we reach out to where people are open-minded around hiring people in neurodiversity. Maybe in the Western world or the Asian or African world. The first question, I would say that 9.9% of the time that I'm unfortunate to receive from a diversity inclusion manager, maybe at a financial institution or big corporations, wherever I meet them in the world, is how do I know that they can do the job? So already at that moment, there's some kind of a blockage of, they look different. Am I going to be putting my neck on the line here? Am I going to be risking my position, my career, even though they have diversity inclusion? And I'm being very open and blunt here, and you'll learn from me that I speak straight out. It doesn't matter if they're Western thinkers or they are non-Western thinkers. It's exactly the same challenges we have in the workplace. So it's not just something in the Philippines. But what you need to recognize, and what I was hoping to share through my talk about, that the industry today, with the growth of technology and the level of amount of technology is becoming more and more. I've been on the cloud journey since Microsoft started there in 2008 when they went with the first cloud components, and since then. And every time I meet an IT professional, he tells me or she tells me, do I have to fire my staff? I said, no, you need to teach them to become specialists, because the cloud components, we're going to keep adding new features, and there's just a limit to the individual's brain and capacity. So you need to learn and dividing your workforce into specialists. And the sooner you start, the greater success you have and the better advantage you have comparing to your competitors. So it is the right time to look at hiring people and dividing your workforce into specialist groups. As a manager, we tend to look at resources as all have a title, they're all seniors, whatever, and we treat them all equally. But instead, we should not. We should say, well, Peter can do this, and he's actually pretty good at these 3 things, and these 2 things he can't do it. And Mary over here, she's good at these 2 things that Peter doesn't do, so I'll give her all that plus the other thing. And you start dividing your resources. And what I shared earlier from our Austrian example is that when you start dividing the task among your resources, people are thriving because they're doing what they like most. And you're also learning to use a wrench when you need a wrench and a screwdriver when you need a screwdriver, not trying to give them a common tool set, use it all. I hope that helps provide how we as leaders in our team leadership should start slicing our workforce and being more individual specialists around our team people.
This is a third question. I just rephrase it. They are asking if we will hire people with disability. Should our educational sector be involved already by filling in the gap to provide them with the skills that will be needed in the future so that they can be more inclusive? And as for your organization, like you're not yet, you don't have a presence yet in the Philippines, should the HR managers take a course from you to know how to go about hiring these people with disabilities, like the autism sector?
So let me start with the last question first, is that how will we support you in the Philippines? So, and as I brought up earlier, we have Australia, which we have a very strong presence. So Australia right now is our main hub for the region. So if we have an HR, an organization in the Philippines that wants to engage, we will be supporting you for the first start from Australia. So we're nearby, in a close by time zone. And of course, our objectives over time, and I know I spoke with Gay about this too, that we want to establish the organization as well with the right presence in the Philippines over time. But as a start, we are nearby, so it won't be from Europe, it'll be mainly from Australia. The second part of the first part of the question was around education. There's 2 sides to that. First of all is that some of our people, a lot of them, 85% of the more or less is pretty much educated. So they've gone to universities or all kinds of backgrounds, and they have skill sets, but for the reasons that I started off the interview is they're basically failing in the interview process. So they're not getting recognized, so they're not in the right positions in jobs. So they have the educations that they need. But again, being a person that's been rejected and you're in the neurodiversity mindset, a lot of times you tend to then find your own geekiness and then you start educating yourself. So, and this is maybe a little bit where we're touching on the mindset, is that if you haven't gone to university or school, you don't have a skill set. That's very much what we see. But a lot of these people are self-educated and they don't necessarily, I wouldn't say have to go to school, because if they're interested in programming or they're interested in numbers and math, they will be spending all their day doing that. And as you're sourcing for someone who can do analytics and other components, we can dig out that skill set and put it to work. Now, if there's a need for education on top of that, that's where we collaborate with, in Denmark, for example, and other regions, we helped the education institutions in creating programs for these people. So you can send them to training to take either cloud or AI or other programming that you may need, but we first need to understand that they like to do what you need them to do first. And I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. The next question I think will be directed to Vedika. It says, what would be the first step for banks or other institutions who would like to partner with water.org in the Philippines? And is a communal credit facility available, like instead of individual persons availing of credit facility for their water and sanitation requirements, and the entire community or village pursue to build a water system that has a capacity to support them in their needs?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Edith. So as I said, we've been in Philippines now for more than 5 years, and Philippines is actually one of our fastest growing countries of impact. And we do partner with a wide variety of financial institutions. And we recognize that every financial institution is obviously different. So the financial institutions which already reach people living in poverty with either with individual products, that's the easiest. We have a lot of technical help we can give you. We can convince you that you should also make loans for water and sanitation. It could be a completely separate loan, or it could be an add-on loan. So several of our partners, for example, make home improvement loans, and then they add on a water and sanitation. So that could be one way. There are financial institutions which do not directly reach people living at the base of the economic pyramid because they don't have micro lending. So either they can make wholesale loans to institutions, which in turn have the last mile reach, or in some countries we find that they reach the last mile through what is called agent banking or correspondent banking in different countries. So that's also possible. The third question which you ask, and how do you do it? I'm very happy to introduce you to my colleagues in Philippines. Please reach out and please reach out to me, and we would be absolutely delighted to have this conversation. I think the third question, are there community solutions? And I will be honest, yes, first of all, yes, the answer is yes. So one way is by working with service providers, right? So water utilities. So we do a lot of work with strengthening the water utilities so that they in turn can, are bankable, they in turn can raise funding to expand their reach. So that's one point. But we also have interesting examples where not the whole village, but we've had like 5 families or 10 families get together and develop a solution where they all contribute, and as a group they borrow. It gets harder when you think of community-based solutions because you have the issue of who owns the asset, you have the issue of who does operations and maintenance. So it's a little harder to do, but absolutely doable. And for example, we see a lot of very successful enterprises around drinking water. So community drinking water. You know, a lot of regions have a big issue of water contamination because of pathological or bacterial contaminants. And so we have very successful enterprises which provide community drinking water. And it's absolutely possible to look at loan solutions for such a community-owned financial institution. And I also wanted to react to what Rachel said when I was listening to her presentation. I was also thinking, oh, wow, we should work together. So I look forward to that too.
That's good to hear. Anyway, somebody commented, it's nice to hear your talk, Vedika. And we would, maybe you can ask one of your founders to pay us a visit to further strengthen the awareness of your noble cause. I guess this is directed to Mr. White or Mr. Matt Damon, maybe Matt Damon. Anyway.
So I have to say they were both in Philippines in 2019, by the way. Both Gary and Matt were in Philippines in 2019. Obviously, 2020, the whole world stopped traveling. But sure, we will be back.
Yeah, and I think the Phoenix, we have this yearly October conference that we have. We'd like to have somebody represent water.org again to present the entire community, not only in a forum. Anyway, for the next question, Vedika, how's your experience so far in doing this project in the Philippines? Is it successful? Can you say it's 100% successful, or were there any challenges for you?
I think that's a great question. And we get asked this oftentimes, that we work in 11 countries across 3 continents. And is the work exactly the same? And the answer has to be no, right? And it cannot be the same. So I think that's the first thing, which is, and I know Rachel spoke about it also a lot. So making sure that we are listening to the people, listening to the communities. What are the problems they are facing? How are they addressing those problems today? And what barriers are they facing? And can we solve for those barriers? And I think that's incredibly important. That takes time. It's an iterative learning process. And that's the first thing I would say. Second, also, recognizing that, and then recognizing where can we add value, right? So, for example, again, speaking about Philippines and giving an example of utilities, you have some fantastic water utilities, right? Manila Water and all of its companies. There's nothing we can add value there. These are very well-run, efficient companies. But where we can add value is saying, okay, people living in this informal settlement, they can actually be good customers. And let's show you how they can be good customers. And if you expand your network there, you will be able to reach more people who are able to reduce their cost of access and get sustainable access. So being very laser focused on where we can add value, and where we can add value will vary across countries. And again, that's an iterative process. And I think in Philippines, that's something we're learning. In the initial years, we tried to do a lot, and now we're getting more and more focused about, okay, where is it that we can add value? Where is the missing gap? Where is the missing barrier? And can we help overcome that? And I think the third thing I would say, again, in Philippines and across all the countries, which we're learning, is initially the temptation is to put your head down and try and do everything yourself. But I think over time, you realize that actually there's some fantastic partners in country as well as across multilateral sort of partners. So how can we leverage each other's strengths? It's more difficult, right? It's easier to work on your own. It's much more difficult when you work in partnerships, but it's much more sustainable. So for example, we're working very closely with UNICEF in Philippines to convince the government also to look at blended finance solutions for the poorest of the poor. And so I think those are the lessons. Make it much more local specific, local context specific, work in partnerships, and be laser focused about where we can add value.
Rika, just a quick question. Somebody just messaged, is your default rate high, or it's manageable, or is it zero?
That's a very good question, and I'm surprised at myself that I didn't talk about it before. So this is something we're very proud of. Often people think that people living in poverty are high credit risk, but they're not. So globally, the repayment rate for these water and sanitation loans has been consistently almost close to 100%. So it's been 98% plus. Of course, the repayment rates did decline during COVID times, especially in the quarter when the whole economies were in full lockdown. But the repayment rates have consistently been really high, and they have been either as high as the other microloan products or sometimes even higher than the other microloan products. Yeah.
Thank you, Vedika. I'll go to Rachel now. Rachel, it's like a lot of banks are going digital. What makes Time different from the other digital banks? And how can the depositors be assured that you will not be used as a conduit for money laundering purposes and those things?
Well, I mean, in terms of why are we different? I think, the kiosks for onboarding are very different from most digital banks and from banks with branches, in that they're inside the grocery store. So where you go, where you're actually going on a day-to-day basis. And when you're there, you can actually start to do your banking. And that's quite different from the other ones, excuse me. I'm not sure what has happened, but and so that's quite different. But actually, when you use the kiosk, then it's doing full anti-money laundering, all the checks when you're onboarding. So all the checks that would happen in any bank are doing at the same time. And that makes it so it's very foolproof. So one is that you're not having the chance that things are being taken or that people are getting onto the accounts and onto the bank that shouldn't be, because we do all the checks. The kiosk is actually quite, as well as a manufacturing fee. It's also it learns on its own, and actually our kiosks now speak like Mandarin, and we have them speaking Arabic, and they can speak any, most languages. So they actually are very easy to use, and while at the same time doing substantial checks in the background. So while you're standing there answering questions, it's taking pictures and feeding that into different databases and doing lots of checks. So that's the first thing. The second is that actually we have many different defenses against all kinds of cybersecurity, all kinds of money laundering, all of that. That there's, just because it's digital doesn't mean that there's any less different in terms of risk and corporate governance and any of the cybersecurity that's going on. So we work and have a full tech team that's handling that, and we've had, knock on wood so far, no issues. And we take it really seriously in terms of our design and our tech. That's what we spend the time in doing, is making sure that that's all kind of taken care of. We're lucky to have started the bank in South Africa, which has a very excellent and very well-developed regulated and financial system because of different issues around crime in South Africa. So we feel like we've been tested in many ways. So we'll be able to actually do that and bring all of those learnings into the Philippines. That, we're not doing this for the first time. We're bringing our whole technology that we've learned and all of our lessons in operating into the Philippines when we start there.
And Rachel, you mentioned that you recently have a tie-up already with the Robinson Group, or the Summit Group. There's a question here. How soon are you going to be available already in the retail and the grocery stores?
So what the next step is that we'll be applying for, there's a new digital bank license in the Philippines, and we'll be applying for that license. And we hope, it still will take some time because you get a licensing, you go through the process. We found working with the BSP amazing. They're fabulous to work with. It's been a very positive experience. And so, we hope that we're granted a license and that then we would be operational, early in 2022. So soon you'll be seeing our kiosks, and we look forward to, serving people in the Philippines and learning kind of the differences as well as the similarities with South Africa, the differences in the markets in the Philippines, and building that out.
And I think your model in South Africa is hiring the youth. Will you also implement
Yes.
that model in the Philippines?
Yes, so the same, we'll have ambassadors from the communities, and we'll, we worked with different youth nonprofits, people who had never had a job before. It's over 40% unemployment in youth in South Africa. So, we really focus on that community in which to hire from, people who had always wanted a job but never been able to get a job, and we train them and then work with different groups to then have them as ambassadors, and it's been a hugely successful program. It's something
Maybe
we're really proud of. So we want to do that in the Philippines as well. And it's kind of interesting to think about how to do that with the communities that Haitham has spoken about as well.
Yeah, you can also tap into community Haitham
Yes.
as well. And can I go back to Haitham? There's a question like, once you hired the neurodiversity population, you have to make sure that you adjust your work environment to suit their needs, or they can adapt on their own. And then another related question is, can these like autistic employees adapt to the changing technology, fast changing technologies, and they adapt the pressure of work?
Very good question, and I didn't mention it in my presentation around hiring people on the autism. It's a very good time to mention that when you've met one person on the autism spectrum, you met one person. So that means you meet two, you met two and three. So you won't find people on the spectrum you cannot put them all in one box. And we have a saying that an autistic person, you don't put them in a box, they come and make their own box. Meaning with that is that they are individuals and they will have the individual's challenges. And the question is very good in the perspective that people are very high performing. They may not need to any specific adaptations. When we talk about adaptations, it's basically where do you want to sit? Do they want to sit with their back to the wall or more quiet areas? And some are very more communicative, very outspoken, and they're the completely opposite. They want to be the part of the talking part. They're going to be very social. So yes, so part of the inclusion and part of what we help with is that we have set up an understanding of the person. We know where their challenges would be, and with their organization, with the team, we will place them in the right environment. May it be quiet, may it be in the middle, or be independent. So to answer the question, yes, we will help you know how you best position them so they can perform to their best effort. And again, one person is one person, two persons are two persons. And most of you already have people that are on the spectrum, they're already in your organization, but they're very high functioning and you haven't recognized it, or you may have recognized they're odd once in a while because they can adapt to these environments. To the question around technology, that's where they're also very good, because if the technology is changing and adapting and it's in that area where they're interesting, they are very quick, good learners. They are very much keen on adding new value. I have in my team, we just took on a young boy not recently, and he's had to bring in some knowledge around tools that he wasn't clear about, but he was very curious. And it was really surprising to the rest of my senior leaders that overnight, over a shorter period of time, he became very in-depth aware of it. And of course, you can't say this is for all, but they actually are very good at learning new technologies. So the question is, as technology adopts, people on the spectrum are very good learners and very rapid learners as well.
Okay, I guess the next question is for the three resource speakers. What are some of the major challenges that you have experienced for your respective organizations in terms of maybe logistics, socio-cultural aspects, and even the stakeholders? How were you able to overcome these challenges? I guess we can start with Haitham, or whoever wants to get.
I don't know. I think Vedike was starting. Let the lady start. I will take last. I think that would be the right way.
Sure. So I think this is such a wide question that I could go on and on, right? But so let me try and break it down and probably just talk about the various stakeholders. I think I want to start with the people who we serve, right? So people who are in poverty, who lack access to safe water and sanitation. I think first, as I said, is are we really sitting down and understanding what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Often NGOs can come in and say, oh, we know the answer, right? Or this is what you should do. And I think that's probably the worst way to start. So the way to start is, okay, what are listening to people, what are the problems you're trying to solve, and then developing appropriate solutions for them. What you might not appreciate, or what people may or may not appreciate, is a part of what we do, especially when we talk about access to safe sanitation, there's a behavior change component. And there's a very big behavior change component. And again, what works for behavior change certainly varies across countries, but it can even vary within a country. So in the country from where I am and where I live in India, what might work as behavior change in the southern part of the country is not necessarily what might work in the northern part of the country. So listen to the communities, go with an open mind, do not come with, oh, I know the solution which you want. I think that is probably the biggest mistake. The second challenge which we face is often with financial institutions, right? Financial institutions will say, oh, but this loan, why should I make a loan for somebody building a toilet or somebody getting a water connection that looks like a non-productive use? It's not going to lead to their income increasing, so they will not be able to repay. And so that is, and which I understand. I come from the financial world, and you can't tell a financial institution make this loan if they think it's a bad asset quality. So the good news is, over the years, we've got so much evidence base that we are able to sit down with the financial institution and show that actually this loan will get repaid. But that is a big concern of our financial institution partners. Also, the concern is if this loan looks very different, if it needs a lot of selling, if it needs a lot of different ways, how can it work, right? The staff in the field, she or he has so many other things to sell. They're not going to spend their time on something which is very bespoke. So how can we make it look like any other product? So I think that's a big challenge which we have with financial institutions. With governments, sometimes we have the challenge, governments will say, oh, nobody needs to borrow. We will give the money because we will provide this ubiquitous service to everybody. And that is great. It should be the right of everybody to get access to safe water and sanitation, but we know the reality. Everybody has limited budgets. So convincing the governments how this is complementary and how this can stretch their own budgets to the maximum. Sometimes we have to convince governments that access to safe water and sanitation should be right on top of their priority list. It's not often the case. I have to say COVID has helped. It's gone high up in the priority list, but sometimes it's not. And then finally with companies, the companies might also turn around and say, why is this relevant, or how can we partner? So those are, again, interesting conversations we would have. So I think tailoring the conversation to meet the objectives of that stakeholder and to understand the objectives of that stakeholder is probably the most important thing. I'll end here, Edith.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of challenges that we had, time. I mean, when I said Time Bank, we just celebrated our second birthday. We were a very new bank, and when you look across South Africa, most of the other large banks have been there for decades, or one few over 100 years. So when you come in as a new institution, you need to really build trust, and you really need to spend time thinking about the customers and who you're really serving and what they're looking for, and then stay in some ways true to that. So we hit 1 million customers in November 2019, after about 9 months of being in operation, and then COVID hit in South Africa, and there was a very severe lockdown where you could only go to the grocery store, which actually was in our favor, but it was a huge, and still, I mean, people continually talk about South Africa variants. So everyone knows it's been very challenging in South Africa. But I think that what instead, being very true to what we wanted to do and the customers we were trying to serve kind of helped us. And so we re-emphasized that and changed products and services and kind of made a lot of things free during that worst period so that our customers knew we were there with them. And in that way, also thinking about what we really want and what we really need to have in terms of partners to expand, it got us to be very focused on what we bring to the table. And in that way, I think that, we started to move forward, accomplish more, and be very true and very purist in our strategy. And that's what led us, including help from Gay, who's on this, to meet, our partners in the Philippines. And that was a major turning point for us in terms of being able to expand, and think of what we're trying to do as a company, because, we're just 10 people here in Hong Kong and, 150 in South Africa and 130. It's to have a financial institution, it's quite a small number. So it's about kind of making sure the team is all together, thinking about how to build that and making sure everyone thought, what are we trying to do in that way? And then building forward all together.
Thank you, Rachel. Haitham, last words.
Thanks for the question, because I think that's the headline of our topic for today. And there are two folds in answering what are the biggest challenges. One was, I hope I've touched a little bit on the unknown about the people on the diverse or the neurodiverse or on the autism spectrum. Back to the weed or the dandelion, they have very strong skills. We just have to learn how to harvest that. That's pretty much us as leaders. And that brings me to the most important challenge that we're facing is leaders. And this is my reaching out to you, is the word we call it psychological safety in the workplace. When I get the questions from leaders, can they do the job? They don't do it because they're not big-hearted and they want to do what's right. It's because they feel challenged in their workplace or by their leadership. If I make a risk here, if I put someone in a position that I'm not completely falls in one of the boxes, am I putting my neck on the line? Am I risking my job or my career? My ask to you is to look into your organizations and provide that means for learning, that means for growth. In the old days, in the early 70s and 80s, we all heard the expressions, and you're all in banking, since no one lost their job for choosing IBM. I would say the very clear here, no one will lose their jobs for hiring someone on the autism spectrum and choosing the right partner. We've proven it works. We have a strong record of proving that these people in their challenges may be highly capable or even, I would say, more challenged. They still can provide you with great value. But we need you as leaders to take that first step and allowing your leaders to make that experimentation. I use the word experimentation because that's where true leadership is going to happen. They're going to have to look into how they're going to lead these people in their way, but it also influences, you saw on the Australian method, that we start leading and communicating with others more openly and directly, versus the saying that it's underlining in our message, versus be more clear. So we become better leaders ourselves. So it's a good approach. It's a beneficial and will add value to your organization, but we need you to be open-minded and providing that platform for your leaders. So I hope that shares with you. And Rachel, I'm absolutely there to help growing your business, or what we need to do in the same Vedika. We can help provide those right matches for you and make this a success. But foremost to all on the line here, it's really in your hands to make this successful in your organization. We have all the tool set that needs to be success.
Thank you, Haitham. And of course, welcome to Time Bank, and Water.org has been in the country already. We hope to see the founders again sometime in the near future. And for Haitham, I hope you will be able to establish a specialist organization here in the country which will uplift neurodiversity spectrum population in the country. And 30 seconds. Any last words from the three of you before we give for the closing remarks to Ned Goseco? Jedica, would you like to start? Just a quick
I
final
really
word.
liked how Haitham ended it, which is take the risks, be open to different ways of working, and be open to serving not just people who you've thought of traditionally as customers, but literally, as Gay mentioned, not leaving anybody behind.
Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank the organizers because, you know, this is a really interesting discussion to have kind of across three various different sectors and thinking about inclusion in very different ways. And I just think it was, you know, a really interesting way to think about how to put this together. So more power to you. And, you know, I think thank you to all of the participants because you got to hear, you know, very different ways to think about similar problems and made it think that, you know, how we can all work together. So I'm really happy to have met this organization, Phoenix, but also my fellow panelists, because I don't think that I would be, I knew Water.org from when I was at IFC, but Haitham, you know, I wouldn't have been exposed to organization. So I really thank all of you for, you know, coming together and putting this together.
Haitham?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share the opportunities that we want to help you with. Thanks for the leadership, for inviting, and for the panelists as well for providing your time, because you are the most important. You're the leaders of your organizations. You are the trendsetters in your organizations. And it's interesting to see how water, banking, and resourcing come together. And in the end, it just shows that we are diverse. But the diversity is also our strength. And you there, I hope we have touched on your how to say, curiosity to learn more. Feel free to reach out, and hope to have more communication with you over time. And definitely, we look forward to establishing ourselves and stronger presence in the Philippines as well. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Now, do I go back to George or?
Yeah, if somebody can allow me to start my video, I'll take over.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Edith, and thank you to all
Thank
of
you,
our
George.
speakers for an excellent afternoon. So our final portion is the closing remarks from Mr. Ned Goseco, our liaison director of Audit Committee and Assistant Treasurer of the Phoenix Academy. Ned, please go ahead.
Thank you, George. It was a wonderful afternoon actually for us. It was a great opportunity as well to learn new things. Gay opened with our clarion call to survive through the pandemic and thrive in the new world. No one should be left behind. This afternoon provided the different dimensions and facets of inclusions, so no one would precisely be left behind. Our first speaker, Mr. Haitham, that gave us a glimpse of an opportunity that we never were aware of. A strong base of neurodiverse candidates that could give us a competitive edge in the fourth industrial revolution. Our second speaker, Ms. Vedika Bandarhar, shared with us the impact efforts of Water.org and why safe water and sanitation would lift people out of poverty by providing financial and social inclusion. She shared with us both the global and Philippine challenges. Some data that she provided: 59 million in the Philippines lack access to safe water, 26% of the population lack access to safe sanitation, 10 million have no hand washing facilities, which is the basic requirement and basic defense against COVID-19. She shared with us the solutions as well and the partnerships that we could harness to solve the water crisis. Our third speaker, Ms. Rachel Freeman of Time, shared with us that they will soon be in the Philippines through Robinson. I was going to say Robinson Bank, but I guess it's also with the Robinson stores, right? To change the way we bank forever by bridging the digital divide through an integration of physical retail ecosystems. She shared with us some of the basic challenges in digital banking: access to customers, trust, of course, the cost of a relevant solution, to empower the financially challenged. We wish to thank our speakers again, Mr. Haitham Alda, Ms. Vedika Bandarhar, Ms. Rachel Freeman. Thank you too to our organizers, Chairperson Gay Santos, Co-Chair Joey Camus, and Director Ayan Guevara. And of course, to you, our participants, there are more than 200 of you who shared with us this afternoon. We certainly hope you enjoyed this Phoenix webinar, and we look forward to sharing with you in other programs. Thank you all, and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ned.
George, back to you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'd like to close the program. I guess that's it. So we let everybody go now. Edith?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Hito,
Yeah,
Vedika, and Rachel.
Yeah, maybe
Thank you,
request
thank you.
Vedika and Hitum and the core group to stay on just for 2 seconds.
2 seconds,
All
okay.
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very
I
much.
think- Yeah. So I think anyway, just want
Thank you.
Vedika, Hitum, thank you very much. I mean, I am very moved by the willingness to work together, and we look forward to the collaboration across Phoenix, across Special Listernet, across water.org. And Rachel unfortunately has to drop off, but I'm sure this is just the first of the many steps to collaborate moving forward. Thank you, Hitum.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Vedika, thank
you.
you very much.
Vedika, we'd love to
Thank you,
have
thank
much
you.
Thank you very
Damon.
much, President Francis.
Thank you.
Grateful. Joey, bye.
See you
Thank
soon.
you.
See
See
you
you.
soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jay.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Be
Thanks,
safe.
thanks.
Very interesting.
Yes,
Very
yes,
interesting. Very.
President Francis, I'm really moved kasi they're open to working together. And
Yes.
Gay,
yeah.
Gay, baka mag-guess mo sa October si Matt.
Ano na?
Oo, pakisabi.
Baka pwede i-guess si Matt. Oo,